You can love an avoidant for years and still feel like you're standing on the outside of their heart, because there's one emotional line they almost never cross with an empath, unless something inside them finally shifts. And once you understand what that line actually is, you'll stop blaming yourself for why they pull away, shut down, or act like they care one moment and disappear the next. Hey, I'm Simone, and for years I really believed that if I just loved someone harder and if I stayed more patient, eventually they would open up. But the more I gave, the more they seemed to pull away. And I kept asking myself, what am I doing wrong? Eventually, I realized something. Avoidants aren't always rejecting love. They're protecting themselves from emotional closeness that feels terrifying to them. So in this video, I want to talk about the line avoidants almost never cross with an empath and what actually has to happen before they finally do. So, let's break this down in a simple way. Because when people hear the title, "Avoidants never cross this line with an empath," they usually assume the line is commitment. But that's not really it. An avoidant can sometimes say the words and make the plans and still never truly cross the emotional line. That line is emotional surrender. And I don't mean surrender as in becoming weak or being controlled by another person. It's where they stop relating through control and start relating through vulnerability. And avoidants don't cross this line because someone begs, chases, overgives, or over-explains. In fact, those things often make the avoidant feel even more threatened, and we'll get into why in a moment. But first, you have to understand what that line feels like from the avoidant's side. Because from the empath's side, emotional closeness feels natural and healing. It feels like, if we love each other, why wouldn't we talk about this? Why wouldn't we go deeper? Why wouldn't we share what we feel? But to an avoidant, emotional closeness can feel like being trapped. This is what people are usually talking about when they mention the avoidant's fear of engulfment. And that fear isn't always conscious. The avoidant may not be sitting there thinking, "I'm afraid of engulfment." They may just feel irritated and suddenly unsure. They may start focusing on your flaws. They may convince themselves they need space. They may say things like, "This is too much," but underneath those words, their nervous system is often saying something much deeper. Closeness is not safe. And this is important because avoidants are not always avoiding love itself. Many of them crave love. They may even deeply admire people who are emotionally open, warm, and consistent. But when real love gets close enough to require vulnerability, their system can interpret it as danger, because love asks them to do the very thing they learned not to do. Depend, need, trust. And if early attachment taught them that needing someone led to disappointment, rejection, criticism, or emotional overwhelm, then closeness in adulthood can activate an old survival strategy of pulling away and being independent. This is why an avoidant can seem calm on the outside while feeling completely flooded on the inside. They may look cold, often sharing traits with those diagnosed with a narcissistic personality disorder. But internally, they may be dealing with emotional overload. And here's the part most empaths really need to hear. The empath's love can be beautiful, deep, and sincere. But it can also become a trigger, because the empath exposes the avoidance wound. To them, it can feel like pressure they must move away from. This creates the classic loop. The avoidant withdraws. The empath feels abandoned. And suddenly, two people who may genuinely care about each other become locked in this painful dance where both are trying to feel safe, but each person's safety strategy triggers the other. So what actually makes an avoidant cross that line? This is the key. An avoidant crosses the line when emotional closeness starts to feel safer than emotional distance. Not when they're pressured or cornered. Not when the empath finally finds the perfect sentence that magically unlocks them. They cross it when their own system begins to realize, this person is not trying to consume me. Being seen does not mean being controlled. That is the shift. For the avoidant, the line is crossed when they stop experiencing closeness as a threat to their independence and begin experiencing it as a place where they can still be themselves. And this usually happens slowly, not in one dramatic confession. It happens through repeated experiences of safety. Small moments where they open up and are not shamed. when they ask for space and are not punished, or when they realize connection does not have to mean losing freedom. But here's the important balance. Safety does not mean having no boundaries. And this is where many empaths get confused. They hear, the avoidant needs safety, and they think, so I need to tolerate everything. But that is not safety. That is self-abandonment, and it often enables the pattern. Real safety includes boundaries and being your true self. A secure connection is not created by one person endlessly absorbing pain while the other person avoids responsibility. A secure connection is created when both people learn to regulate themselves enough to stay present. That means the avoidant has work to do, but so does the empath. They have to stop making the avoidant's nervous system their full-time project. They have to stop treating crumbs of connection like proof of destiny. So if you are the empath watching this, here is what you do. First, stop chasing the line. Stop trying to drag them across it. Because the more you chase, the more their system may feel engulfed, and the more your system will feel abandoned. Instead, create conditions for truth. That means you communicate calmly and clearly. You might say, I care about you, but I need emotional consistency. Or, I understand you need space sometimes, but disappearing without communication doesn't work for me. Or, I'm not asking you to be perfect, I'm asking you to be present and honest. That kind of communication is very different from pleading. Pleading says, please choose me. Clarity says, this is what I need to stay connected in a healthy way. Second, regulate yourself before you respond. This is huge, because when your nervous system is activated, you may feel an urgent need to fix everything right now. You may want to send the long message and analyze every word. But if you respond from panic, the avoidant often feels pressure. So before you respond, slow down, breathe. Take space in your own body. Ask yourself, am I communicating from love or from fear? That pause can change everything. Because safety begins in your own nervous system first. Third, stop rewarding disappearance with over-pursuit. If an avoidant withdraws, you do not need to punish them, but you also do not need to chase them endlessly. You can leave the door open without standing outside it all night. You can say, I'm here when you're ready to talk, but I'm not going to keep pushing. Then return to yourself and your life. Because the healthiest thing an empath can do is not to be less loving, but to not abandon the self. Fourth, watch behavior more than words. Avoidants may sometimes say they care. They may say they don't want to lose you. And those words may be sincere. But the real question is, are they learning? Are they taking responsibility? Are they becoming more emotionally available over time? Because the line is not crossed by one vulnerable conversation. The line is crossed by a new pattern of letting connection matter more than control. And fifth, know when to stop waiting. This may be the hardest part. Because empaths often have extraordinary hope. They can forgive distance and explain away inconsistency. They can see the wound behind the behavior. But understanding someone's wound does not mean you must live inside it. If the avoidant refuses to grow, communicate, take responsibility, or keeps you in a cycle where you're always anxious, confused, and emotionally starving, then the loving choice may be to step back, not as punishment, but as self-respect. Because the goal is not to make an avoidant cross the line. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself over and over again. Now, if an avoidant does cross this line, what does it actually look like? It usually starts small. They tell you what they feel instead of disappearing. They ask for space with reassurance instead of silence. They stop treating your needs like an attack. They let themselves depend on you in small ways. They allow your love to affect them without immediately running from it. And maybe most importantly, they begin to show curiosity about their own patterns. And that is a huge win. They start asking, why do I pull away when I care? Why does closeness make me feel trapped? Why do I feel safer alone, even when I'm lonely? What am I protecting myself from? That self-awareness is often the beginning of crossing the line. Because avoidant patterns cannot change while the avoidant believes the problem is always the other person being too much. Change begins when they can say, something in me gets scared when love gets close. That sentence alone can shift the entire relationship. Because now the avoidant is no longer just reacting, they are observing. And once they can observe the pattern, they have a chance to interrupt it. This is why pressure does not work. Instead, it activates defense. But awareness creates choice. And choice is what allows someone to move from avoidance to secure connection. A secure relationship does not mean nobody ever feels afraid. It means fear is no longer in charge, and the avoidant can say, "I feel overwhelmed," without disappearing. It means both people can slow down enough to stay in the conversation. Because remember this, safety enables learning. When people feel emotionally attacked, trapped, or abandoned, they do not learn. They fight, flee, or shut down. But when there is enough safety, the nervous system softens. Curiosity and empathy returns. The person can begin to ask, "What is actually happening here?" And that is where healing becomes possible. So let's bring this all together. The line avoidants rarely cross with an empath is not just commitment. The real line is vulnerability without escape. It is allowing themselves to be emotionally seen without immediately retreating into control, distance, numbness, or silence. They fear this line because closeness can feel like engulfment. And when an empath moves toward them with intensity, even loving intensity, it can trigger the avoidant's old survival pattern. But the avoidant crosses the line only when they begin to experience connection as safer than distance. That happens through emotional safety, consistency, self-awareness, and the willingness to stay present through discomfort. And for the empath, the lesson is just as important. Do not abandon yourself trying to prove you are worthy of being chosen, and do not confuse their potential with their actual capacity. Be loving and understanding, but establish your boundaries. Because the most powerful thing you can offer an avoidant is not endless pursuit, but calm, grounded, self-respecting love. The kind of love that says, "I can see your fear, but I will not disappear into it." An avoidant can cross this line with an empath, but only when they stop seeing love as something that will consume them and begin to experience it as something that can finally help them come home to themselves. But are you actually an empath, or just someone who has an anxious attachment style? Find out in the next video.